The filthy truth about being poor in medieval times. When people imagine the Middle Ages, they often picture stone castles, armored knights, roaring feasts, and golden goblets overflowing with wine. That image belongs to a tiny fraction of society. For most people, medieval life was not heroic or romantic. It was poor, cold, exhausting, and relentlessly filthy. To be poor in medieval times did not simply mean having less money. It meant living on the edge of hunger, disease, and social invisibility. Poverty was not a temporary phase. It was a condition many were born into and never escaped. Most medieval people were peasants. In some regions, over 90% of the population lived in rural villages, tied to the land they worked. Many were serfs, legally bound to a lord's estate. They could not freely leave, change occupations, or own land in the modern sense. Their lives were dictated by the seasons, the weather, and the demands of their lord. Housing reflected this reality. Poor families lived in small huts made of wood, mud, and straw. Floors were often bare earth, which turned to mud when it rained and dust when it dried. Animals frequently shared the same space. Chickens, pigs, or goats brought indoors at night for warmth and protection. This was not a sign of affection for animals. It was survival. There was no plumbing. Human waste was dumped outside into pits, ditches, or nearby streams. Clean water was hard to come by, and contamination was constant. The same water source used for drinking might also be used for washing clothes, cleaning tools, or disposing of waste. Disease thrived in these conditions. Hygiene, as we understand it, barely existed. Bathing was rare, not because people believed water was sinful, but because heating water took time, fuel, and effort that poor families could not spare. Clothes were worn until they fell apart. Washing them frequently was impractical, especially in winter. Lice, fleas, and mites were constant companions. Food was another daily struggle. The poor did not eat lavish meals. Their diet consisted mainly of coarse bread, porridge, beans, cabbage, onions, and whatever could be grown locally. Meat was a luxury, often reserved for holidays, if at all. When harvests failed, hunger set in quickly. Famine was not a rare catastrophe. It was a recurring threat. In bad years, people ate whatever they could find. Acorns, roots, bark, and weeds became meals. Bread was stretched with fillers, sometimes mixed with ground bones or other inedible materials. Malnutrition weakened immune systems, making even minor illnesses deadly. Medical care was almost non-existent for the poor. Physicians served the wealthy. Poor people relied on folk remedies, prayers, or local healers with limited knowledge. Infections that are easily treated today, cuts, fevers, tooth abscesses, could become fatal. Childbirth was especially dangerous. Many women died giving birth, and many children did not survive infancy. Death was ever present. Cemeteries were crowded, and mass graves were common during epidemics. The poor were buried quickly, often without markers. Their lives left little trace in written history. Work never stopped. From childhood, poor children worked in fields, tended animals, fetched water, gathered firewood, or helped with household labor. There was no concept of childhood as a protected stage of life. If you could walk, you could work. Exhaustion was normal. Rest was a luxury. A day without labor usually meant hunger. Even religious holidays often involved extra obligations rather than rest. Life expectancy was low, not because people aged faster, but because so many died young. Social mobility was extremely limited. Being born poor usually meant dying poor. Laws and customs reinforced this hierarchy. Clothing regulations, for example, dictated what fabrics and colors different classes could wear. Poverty was visible and enforced. Begging existed, but it was dangerous. Beggars were often seen as suspicious or sinful. Some towns punished vagrancy harshly, branding, whipping, or expelling the poor. Charity existed, mostly through the church, but it was inconsistent and never enough to eliminate suffering. Perhaps the most brutal truth is that poverty was normalized. Suffering was expected. Hardship was seen as part of the natural order, or even as God's will. Complaining changed nothing. There were no safety nets, no welfare systems, no guaranteed relief. Yet, despite everything, people endured. They formed communities, shared what little they had, sang songs, told stories, and found moments of joy in a harsh world. Their resilience is often overlooked, overshadowed by the glamour of kings and battles. The Middle Ages were not a golden age for the poor. They were an age of dirt under fingernails, hunger in the stomach, smoke in the lungs, and fear of tomorrow. To understand medieval society honestly, we must look past castles and crowns and see the millions who lived, struggled, and died in the shadows. That is the filthy truth of being poor in medieval times. Close your eyes now. Let the glare of the modern world dissolve into shadow. Let the hum of electricity fade until there is only the sound of your own breathing and the distant, rhythmic creaking of timber in the wind. We are drifting back, dropping through the centuries like a stone falling through dark water, landing softly in the deep, quiet obscurity of the year 1290. You are no longer in your room. You are inside a peasant's hut in the English Midlands, and the air is thick with a scent that defines your entire existence: wood smoke. It hangs in the rafters above you, an acrid, biting fog that stings your eyes even when they are shut and coats the inside of your throat with a fine, gritty dust. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your city and local time in the comments so we can see where everyone is listening from. Now, breathe in that smoke again. It is the smell of safety. Your home is a single room, a hall house, built of timber frames filled with wattle and daub, a mixture of mud, clay, straw, and animal dung that dries into a wall as hard as rock. There is no chimney here. The fire that cooked your evening pottage burns in an open hearth in the center of the earthen floor, and the smoke drifts lazily upward, seeking escape through a small hole in the thatched roof, or simply filtering through the straw itself. This smoke hardening preserves the timber and thatch, keeping the insects at bay, though it leaves your skin perpetually gray and your lungs heavy. You are lying on a pallet, a simple mattress made of burlap, stuffed with straw that crinkles beneath you, pricking through the thin linen of your tunic. The floor beneath your bed is backed earth, beaten smooth by years of footsteps. In the summer, it might be strewn with meadowsweet or lavender to mask the odors of living. But tonight, it is just cold, hard ground. You are not alone in this dark warmth. Listen closely. Beyond the rhythmic breathing of your family, huddled together under a coarse wool blanket, you hear a shifting weight, a low snort, the chewing of cud. At the other end of the hut, separated only by a low wooden partition, or perhaps nothing at all, the livestock are sleeping. Your prize milk cow and a few chickens are inside with you. To modern senses, this proximity might seem repulsive, but here it is a blessing. A cow is a very effective, if somewhat aromatic, space heater. In the deep freeze of winter, that large, warm body radiates enough heat to keep the frost from creeping into your bones. A primitive central heating system that occasionally moves. Historians still argue about the precise layout of these peasant longhouses and how strictly the zones were separated, but the presence of animals was a constant. You are part of the herd, and the herd is part of the family. The darkness is absolute, save for the dying embers of the central fire which casts long dancing shadows against the soot-stained walls. There is a profound sense of enclosure here. The windows are tiny, mere slits in the wall, covered with oiled linen or wooden shutters, sealed tight against the night air, which many believe carries miasmas and harmful spirits. You are safe in your smoky cocoon, yet you are acutely aware of the fragility of this shelter. A spark could ignite the roof. A storm could tear the thatch away. But for now, the silence of the medieval night is deep, broken only by the wind in the eaves or the hoot of an owl. You drift in this suspended state, between the exhaustion of yesterday's labor and the dread of tomorrow's toil, held in the filthy, warm, smoky embrace of home, waiting for the first grey light to touch the edges of the world. The transition from the subconscious to the conscious world begins not with a sudden alarm, but with the creeping, relentless chill of the morning air finding its way through the cracks in the daub. The fire in the center of the room has died down to a pile of sullen grey ash, and the warmth of the animal bodies at the other end of the hut has retreated into the shadows. You wake before the sun does. This is the first law of the peasant. The day belongs to the labor, and the labor begins as soon as there is light enough to see your own hands. You shift beneath the rough wool blanket, your muscles protesting the movement. There is a deep, abiding stiffness in your joints, a legacy of yesterday's lifting and bending that sleep has only partially healed. For a moment, you stay curled in the fetal position, hoarding the last pocket of body heat, listening to the rhythmic chewing of the ox who is already awake and waiting. But the cold is a motivator, sharp and insistent. You throw back the cover, and the air hits you like a physical blow, smelling of damp earth and old straw. It is time to dress, a process that is less about fashion and more about fortification against the elements. You are already wearing your linen undergarment, the chemise or shirt, because you slept in it. In a world where privacy is scarce and the night air is feared, nudity is rare. This linen is your second skin. It is the only layer that is washed with any frequency, boiling in a cauldron of wood ash lye until it is bleached pale again, serving as the barrier between your sweat and the valuable outer clothes. Over this, you pull on your tunic. It is made of russet or burrel, a coarse, heavy wool cloth that feels like a mild abrasive against your neck. It is not soft, but it is miraculous. The natural lanolin left in the fibers makes it water-resistant, keeping you dry in the drizzle, and it holds heat even when damp. It smells faintly of sheep, a scent that never truly leaves you. You fasten it not with buttons, which are a luxury item slowly making their way across Europe, but with simple ties, or perhaps a carved wooden pin. There is no agonizing over what to wear today. You own perhaps 2 outfits, one for work and one for the holy days, and the latter is likely just a cleaner version of the former. You pull on your hose, separate leggings of wool, cut on the bias to stretch, tying them to your belt with points, or laces. If you are a man, you might adjust your braids, the baggy linen drawers that bundle around your waist. If you are a woman, you layer a kirtle over your chemise, lacing it tight to support your back for the heavy lifting to come. The colors of your world are muted, undyed creams, browns and grays, with perhaps a dull yellow from weld or a rusty red from madder root if your village dyer is skilled. The law actually cares about this. Sumptuary laws in various regions dictate that the poor must not wear the bright reds, deep blues, or purples of their betters. Even if you could afford a scrap of velvet, wearing it could see you fined or whipped. Poverty is a uniform, and you are dressed for inspection. Now, you must face the water. There is a common modern myth that medieval people never washed, wandering through life in a cloud of oblivious stench. This is untrue, but the reality is practical rather than indulgent. A full immersion bath requires hauling 30 gallons of water from the stream, heating it over a fire that eats up precious wood, and filling a tub you probably don't own. That is a luxury for the Lord in the manor on the hill. For you, hygiene is a basin of cold water standing by the door. You break the thin film of ice that has formed overnight with your knuckles. A tiny sharp sound in the quiet room. You cup the freezing liquid in your hands and splash your face. The shock of it serving as your morning caffeine. You rub your eyes, scrubbing away the soot of the hearth. You use a rough linen cloth to scrub your neck and behind your ears. It is a quick, shivering ritual. For your teeth, you might rub them with a twig of hazel or a piece of wool dipped in salt if you have it. Or perhaps just rinse your mouth with water or stale wine. You are trying to scrub away the toothworm, the mythical creature people believe bores holes in your molars to cause pain. You run wet fingers through your hair, which is likely cut short or covered by a coif, a close-fitting linen cap that keeps the lice at bay and the dirt out of your eyes. Historians still argue about the prevalence of soap in peasant households during this specific century. Some say soft soap made from animal fat and wood ash was common, while others suggest it was reserved mostly for laundry, leaving your skin to be cleaned by friction and water alone. Either way, you are clean enough for the fields. There is no mirror to check your reflection. You know your face only by touch or by the reflection in a still pail of water. A face weathered by wind and sun, aged beyond its years, perhaps marked by the pockmarks of a childhood sickness survived. You turn to the final morning task before food, the waste. The chamber pot, a simple ceramic or wooden bucket used during the night, must be emptied. You carry it to the door, unbarring the heavy timber beam. This is the moment the world enters. You push the door open, and the light spills in, grey, flat, and quiet. You step out into the mud of the yard. The midden heap is your destination, a designated pile for refuse, manure, and straw, located, hopefully, downwind of the door. You empty the bucket, adding your contribution to the pile that will eventually be spread on the fields as fertilizer. It is a closed loop of existence. What comes from the earth returns to the earth to grow the grain that will feed you again. It is filthy, yes, but there is an honesty to it. You are not separated from the biological realities of life by pipes and porcelain. You live in the cycle. The air outside is different than the smoky interior. It is sharp and smells of wet grass, animal dung, and the coming rain. You take a breath, filling your lungs with the raw morning. Around you, The village is waking up. You hear the creak of other doors, the low murmur of neighbors, the bark of a dog. You are a single cell in a larger organism, all waking up to the same cold realization of labor. You wipe your hands on your tunic, a universal gesture of readiness, and turn back to the dark mouth of your hut. The cold water has done its job. The rough wool has settled against your skin, itching less now that your body heat is warming it. You are awake, you are dressed, you are washed after a fashion. And now your stomach begins to growl, a deep, hollow complaint that demands the next struggle, the quest for fuel to keep the machine moving. Your stomach is not asking for variety. It is demanding volume. In the medieval world, hunger is not a polite signal that it is time for a snack. It is a primal alert, a constant low-level alarm that reminds you that energy is finite and running out. You move toward the hearth, where the embers are being coaxed back into a flame. The morning meal is not breakfast in the way a modern person understands it. No eggs, no bacon, no coffee. It is purely functional. It is breaking the fast of the night to survive the day. You reach for the staple that defines your entire existence, the foundation of every meal, every day, for your entire life. Bread. But this is not the soft, white, airy loaf found in a supermarket aisle. This is maslin bread, a dense, dark, heavy brick baked from a mixture of wheat and rye. It is the fuel of the poor. You pick up a loaf that was baked perhaps 2 days ago. It is hard. In fact, if you tapped it against the wooden table, it would make a thud like a stone. To eat it, you do not slice it delicately. You hack at it with a knife or tear it with strong hands. The crust is thick, almost armored, designed to protect the softer crumb inside from mold and vermin. As you break a chunk off, you notice the texture. It is coarse. The flour was not sifted to a fine powder because you cannot afford the waste that sifting implies. Every part of the grain is here, the bran, the germ, the husk, and something else too. As you chew, you might feel a sudden, sharp grit against your molars. This is stone dust. The millstones that ground this grain rub together, slowly disintegrating over time, depositing tiny fragments of rock into your flour. Over a lifetime, this invisible ingredient will grind your teeth down, wearing them flat. By the time you are 40, your smile will be a testament to the geology of your village. You dip the hard bread into the pottage pot hanging over the fire. This is the perpetual stew, a bubbling, thick, greenish-brown sludge that is always cooking, always changing, yet always the same. It is the original slow cooker meal, but it never stops. Into the pot goes whatever you have. Field beans, dried peas, cabbage, onions, leeks, parsley. And perhaps, if you are lucky, a scrap of bacon fat or a ham bone to lend a ghostly memory of meat to the broth. The bread acts as a spoon, soaking up the liquid, softening just enough to be swallowed. The taste is earthy, salty, and overwhelmingly vegetal. It is not delicious, but it is warm. It fills the hollow space in your belly with a heavy, solid weight that feels like security. Historians still argue about exactly how much meat the average peasant consumed. Some records suggest a fair amount of pork and mutton in good years, while others paint a picture of near vegetarianism born of necessity. But right now, in your bowl, the flavor is strictly garden. There is a subtle danger lurking in this simple meal, a horror that hides in the rye. If the summer was damp and the grain was stored poorly, a fungus called ergot might have taken hold. You cannot taste it, but its effects are terrifying. It causes St. Anthony's fire, a burning sensation in the limbs, hallucinations, convulsions, and even gangrene. Entire villages have been known to descend into madness, seeing demons and writhing in pain, all because their bread was poisoned by the damp. You eat with a quiet, unconscious trust that today's loaf is safe, that the hallucinations belong to someone else, somewhere else. It is a game of Russian roulette played with toast. To wash this down, you do not drink water. At least, not if you can help it. Water is suspect. It comes from the same streams where laundry is washed and waste is dumped. Instead, you reach for a wooden mug of ale. This is not the strong, clear beer of a modern pub. It is small beer, a cloudy, thick, barely alcoholic beverage brewed by the women of the village. It is liquid bread. It is teeming with calories, vitamins, and the yeast needed to keep your digestion moving. It is safer than water because the brewing process requires boiling, which kills the deadly bacteria. Though you do not know this. You only know that water gives you the flux and ale gives you strength. The ale is sour, flat, and warm, but it cuts through the dust in your throat. You drink deep, wiping the foam from your lip with your sleeve. There is a rhythm to this eating. It is fast. There is no conversation, no lingering over the newspaper. You eat standing up or perched on a three-legged stool, your eyes already moving to the tools by the door. The food is fuel, nothing more. Yet, there is a deep, unspoken anxiety attached to every bite. You are eating your seed corn. Every mouthful you consume is one less grain that can be planted for next year. The hungry gap, that terrifying stretch of time in late spring when the old stores are empty, but the new harvest has not yet come, is always in the back of your mind. It is a ghost that haunts the pantry. You count the loaves. You measure the flour level in the bin with a worried eye. To be poor is to be a master of inventory, constantly calculating if the food will last as long as the winter. The bread you eat connects you to the Lord of the Manor in a way that chafes at your soul. You are not allowed to grind your own grain with a hand mill at home. That is often illegal. You are forced by law to take your sack of grain to the Lord's mill, where the miller, a figure often universally hated and suspected of skimming off the top, grinds it for a fee. This banality, as the tax is called, is a reminder that even the bread in your mouth does not fully belong to you. You grew the wheat, you harvested it, you threshed it, but the Lord owns the transformation of it into food. You swallow the bread, and with it, you swallow a small daily dose of resentment. As the heavy pottage settles in your stomach and the ale warms your blood, you feel the energy return. The lethargy of sleep vanishes, replaced by the dull, buzzing readiness for exertion. The fire has done its work. You are a machine that has been refueled. You grab a chunk of cheese, hard, dry cheese that could practically be used as a doorstop, and wrap it in a cloth for your midday meal. This, along with another hunk of bread and perhaps an onion to bite into like an apple, will be your lunch. You take one last look at the hearth. The fire will be banked, covered with ash to keep the coals alive until you return. It is the heart of the home, the only bright thing in a dark life. You step away from the warmth. The transition is abrupt. You move from the smells of cooking, yeast, smoke, onions, to the smell of the day waiting for you. You unlatch the door again. The sun has crested the horizon now, painting the sky in pale, indifferent blues and grays. The village is fully awake. You see others emerging from their huts, chewing the last of their crusts, adjusting their tunics, picking up their tools. There is a silent communion in this morning exodus. You are all fueled by the same dark bread, all driven by the same necessity. You are a wave of humanity washing out towards the open fields. The bread is in your belly, heavy and solid. It will need to sustain you for 10 hours of back-breaking labor. You belch, a quiet, acidic reminder of the rye, and step out into the mud. The fields are waiting. The plow is waiting. And the earth, which cares nothing for your hunger, is ready to be broken. The walk to the fields is not a solitary stroll through a private garden. As you trudge away from the village, your feet sinking into the track that has been churned into a brown paste by generations of boots and hooves, you are joining a slow, silent procession. The sun is now fully up, a pale watery disk behind a veil of low cloud, casting a diffused light that makes the world look like a faded tapestry. You are heading towards the open fields, the vast hedgeless expanses that encircle the village like a quilt of green and brown. This is the open field system, the defining landscape of your life. You do not look out and see a single, square farm with a white fence that belongs to you. Instead, you see hundreds of long, narrow strips of land rippling across the countryside like ribbons. These strips are your livelihood, but they are scattered. You might own a strip here, another half a mile away near the stream, and a third on the stony hill. This scattering is not an accident. It is a medieval insurance policy, ensuring that everyone gets a mix of the good soil, the bad soil, the sunny slopes, and the boggy bottoms. If the frost hits the valley, your hill strip survives. If the hill dries out, your valley strip thrives. It is fair, but it is exhausting. You reach your first strip, marked not by fences, wood is too precious for that, but by balks, low ridges of unplowed turf that separate your labor from your neighbors. Here, the real work begins. You're not gardening. You're wrestling the earth. The soil here is heavy clay, dense and sticky, the kind that clings to your boots in clumps until your feet feel like lead weights. To break it, you need the heavy-wheeled plow. This is a massive, lumbering contraption of oak and iron, a technological marvel of the age that weighs as much as a small cart. It is not something one man can pull, or even one horse. It requires a team. You meet your neighbors at the headland. This is the communal truth of poverty. You cannot survive alone. You might own one ox, your neighbor owns another, and the man down the lane owns 2 more. Together, you yoke them into a team of 4 or 8 beasts, a steaming, snorting engine of muscle that belongs to no one and everyone. The oxen are patient, stoic creatures, their breath puffing in white clouds in the chill air. You run a hand along the flank of your beast, feeling the rough, warm hair and the solid wall of ribcage beneath. You know this animal better than you know some of your own cousins. You know exactly where to scratch it behind the ear to make it move, and you know its stubborn refusal to turn left on Mondays. You step into position at the plow handles. The wooden grips are polished smooth by the sweat and calluses of your father and his father before him. You grip them, bracing your legs, and call out to the team. The leather traces snap taut. The wood groans. The iron coulter bites into the turf with a tearing sound, slicing the roots, and the moldboard behind it turns the slice of earth over, burying the weeds and exposing the fresh, dark soil underneath. This is the rhythm of your day, Step, brace, turn, step, brace, turn. The plow does not glide, it bucks and jerks as it hits stones or tough roots. You must fight it constantly to keep the furrow straight. A crooked furrow is a mark of shame, a sign of a lazy peasant that will be mocked in the village alehouse for weeks. Your muscles burn, the shoulders from holding the handles, the lower back from the constant vibration, the legs from driving forward through the muck. It is a full-body assault. You are walking a furlong, a furrow long, the distance the oxen can pull before they need to stop and catch their breath. It is about 220 yards, a unit of measurement born from the lung capacity of a cow. When the team stops, you stop. You lean on the handles, your chest heaving, wiping the sweat from your forehead with a muddy sleeve. You look at the sky, not to admire the beauty, but to gauge the time. The position of the sun is your only clock. There is a pervasive myth that medieval peasants worked from sunrise to sunset, 365 days a year, a life of unceasing slavery. Historians define this differently. While the work during planting and harvest was incredibly intense, stretching from dawn until dusk, there were long stretches of the year, winter, religious holidays, where the pace slowed. The church provided dozens of saints' days where labor was forbidden, offering a reprieve that even modern workers might envy. But today is not a holiday. Today is a workday, and the sheer monotony of it begins to weigh on you more than the physical effort. It is the mental game of poverty, doing the same task, looking at the same rear end of an ox, walking the same strip of dirt, hour after hour, year after year. Your mind drifts. You worry about the grain stores. You worry about your child's cough. You worry about the rumors of war in a distant county you will never see. Midday arrives not with a bell, but with the sun reaching its zenith. The work stops. You unyoke the oxen to let them graze on the headland grass. You sit on the balk, the damp soaking into your breeches, and unwrap your lunch. The cheese is hard, the bread is dry, and the onion is sharp enough to make your eyes water. But the taste is irrelevant. It is calories. You eat in silence with your neighbors. There is little energy for chatter. Perhaps someone makes a joke about the bailiff, the Lord's overseer, who rides a horse and checks the work, comparing his face to the backside of a pig. It is a small, safe rebellion, a moment of shared humor that lightens the load for a second. You laugh, a dry, raspy sound, and for a moment, the crushing weight of the hierarchy lifts. But then the oxen must be yoked again. The afternoon stretches out, longer and harder than the morning. The light changes, turning golden and then gray. The temperature drops. Your sweat turns cold on your skin. As the sun dips below the tree line, the Vespers bell rings from the church tower in the distance, a faint, melancholy sound carried on the wind. It signals the end of work. The relief is physical, a sudden loosening of the tension in your spine. You unhitch the team, the heavy wooden yoke coming off the oxen's necks with a clatter. You are coated in a layer of earth. It is in your hair, under your fingernails, ingrained in the lines of your face. You are quite literally made of the land you work. You begin the walk back to the village, leading your ox. The animal is tired too, its head low, its gait slow and plodding. You walk together, man and beast, united in fatigue. The village comes into view, small curls of smoke rising from the thatched roofs, promising warmth. You are returning to the same poverty you left this morning, but you have survived another day. You have turned the earth. You have planted the hope of a harvest. The filth of the fields is on you, heavy and unmistakable. But it is an honest filth. It is the evidence of your existence. You are too tired to think about the grand injustices of the feudal system or the philosophy of inequality. You only think of the fire, the pottage, and the moment you can take the weight off your feet, the grey sky darkens to a bruised purple, and the first star appears, indifferent and cold. You are just one of millions of bent backs under this vast canopy, a tiny moving speck in the twilight, trudging home to wash the mud from your hands, only to do it all again when the sun returns. As you cross the threshold of your home, the heavy oak door shutting out the twilight, you become acutely aware of the second skin that has encased you all day. The adrenaline of the work has faded, and now, in the stillness of the hut, the sensory reality of your clothing returns with a vengeance. You are wearing the landscape. The mud from the fields has dried on your hem, turning the bottom inch of your tunic into a stiff earthen crust that swings against your shins with every step. The sweat that soaked your back during the midday exertion has cooled, leaving the wool damp and heavy, clinging to your shoulder blades like a wet dog. In the medieval world, clothing is not merely a fashion statement or a means of modesty. It is a fortress against a hostile environment, and like any fortress, it requires constant, exhausting maintenance. You sit on the bench near the fire and pull at the collar of your tunic. It is made of russet, a coarse cloth woven from the wool of local sheep. It was not carded to perfection. If you run your fingers over the fabric, you can feel the burrs, the tiny twigs, and the thick, uneven slubs of the yarn. It is scratchy, oily, and practically indestructible. This fabric tells the story of your village's women. While you were wrestling the plow, they were wrestling the wool. Every thread in your garment was spun by hand, a task so endless and consuming that the word for a woman's side of the family became the distaff side, named after the tool used to hold the unspun wool. Historians emphasize that a peasant woman's hands were never idle. If she was walking, sitting, or watching children, she was spinning. Your tunic is the solidified time of your mother, your wife, or your sister. It is love rendered in scratchy grey wool. Beneath the wool, your linen chemise is the silent hero. It captures the sweat and the oil, protecting the valuable outer layer. But there is a secret visitor in the seams. You feel a sudden, sharp prick on your ribcage. You shift, scratching absently. It is a louse. In this era, parasites are not a sign of squalor reserved for the destitute. They are a universal constant, democracy in insect form. Kings have them, bishops have them, and you certainly have them. They live in the pleats and the thick, warm folds of your clothes. You might strip by the fire later to crack them, popping them between your thumbnails, but you will never truly be rid of them. They are your constant companions, a tiny, biting reminder of your own mortality. You look down at your legs. If you are a man, your hose, separate woolen leggings, are sagging slightly, the ties at your waist having loosened during the day's labor. They are a patchwork of colors, not by design, but by necessity. When the knee wore through last winter, it was patched with a scrap of brown. When the calf tore on a briar, it was patched with a piece of grey. You are a walking quilt. This visual chaos marks you. In the medieval mind, order is divine and disorder is fallen. The pristine, solid colors of the nobility speak of control and wealth. Your mottled, mended appearance speaks of chaos and scarcity. There is a law about this, a literal rulebook for dressing. The sumptuary laws are a fascinating and bizarre attempt by the ruling class to freeze the social hierarchy in fabric. These laws dictate exactly what you can and cannot wear based on your income and station. You are forbidden from wearing silk, velvet, damask, or taffeta. You cannot wear the color purple, which is reserved for royalty, or bright reds and blues derived from expensive imported dyes. But for you, the peasant, these laws are almost laughable in their redundancy. You couldn't afford a yard of crimson velvet if you worked for 50 years. The law exists not to stop you from buying it, but to remind you that you are not worthy of it. It effectively criminalizes ambition. If you somehow found a gold ring in the mud, wearing it would be a crime. You are legally required to look poor. Your feet are aching. You unlace your shoes, which are simple turn shoes, made by sewing the leather inside out and then soaking it to flip it the right way round. The soles are thin, allowing you to feel every stone and root on the path. In summer, you might go barefoot to save the leather, developing soles as hard as hooves. But now, the leather is damp and misshapen. You set them near the fire, but not too close. If they dry too fast, they will crack and shrink, becoming useless torture devices by morning. There is a delicate art to drying shoes, a skill passed down like a family recipe. You untie your belt. This is the most important utility you own. Medieval clothes have no pockets. If you want to carry something, it hangs from your belt. Your knife, a simple, single-edged blade used for everything from cutting cheese to whittling wood to self-defense, clatters onto the table. A small pouch might hold a flint, a lucky stone, or a few precious coins. Without the belt, the tunic hangs loose and shapeless, a simple sack. Putting on the belt in the morning is girding yourself. Taking it off is the first true breath of rest. The colors of the room and your clothes blend together. You are dyed with the landscape. Your clothes are colored with woad, a plant that gives a faded blue, madder for a rusty red, or walnut shells for a deep brown. But mostly, they are just the color of sheep, of white, gray, and black. Scholarly debate still circles around just how colorful the medieval village actually was. Some argue that peasants loved bright, garish colors and used cheap vegetable dyes to achieve mustard yellows and grassy greens, creating a vibrant, if mismatched, spectacle. Others argue that the labor of dyeing was too costly for everyday wear, leaving the village a sea of drab earth tones. Looking at your sleeve, stained with soil and soot, the debate feels academic. Whatever color this was when it was new, it is now the color of work. As the heat of the fire warms your skin, you feel the itch of the wool lessen, replaced by a dull, throbbing comfort. You are not naked, even when you sleep. You will likely strip off the outer tunic, using it as a blanket, but the linen shift stays on. There is a deep fear of exposure, a sense that the body is something to be covered and contained. The concept of privacy in dressing does not exist. You undress in front of your children, your parents, your animals. There is no shame in the function of the body, only in the sin of pride. You are all bodies together in the dark. This fabric, this rough, scratching, smelling wool, is your armor. It protects you from the sleet that can kill, the sun that blisters, and the brush that tears. It is heavy, yes, It smells of wet sheep and old sweat, yes. But as you run your hand over a neatly darned patch on your elbow, a repair your wife made by candlelight, her eyes straining against the dark, you feel a strange sort of dignity. The patch holds. The fabric endures. It is a testament to stubbornness. You are not made of silk that tears at a whisper. You are made of russet and burl, woven tight against the cold, mended 1,000 times, and ready to face the mud again at dawn. You fold the belt on the bench, a small coil of leather that signifies your readiness to face the world. And for a moment, you are just a soft, vulnerable human shape in a linen shirt, relieved of the weight of your station. As you sit by the fire in your linen shift, the sensation of relief is tempered by a profound realization that defines the mental landscape of the medieval poor. You are never, ever truly alone. In the modern world, privacy is a commodity we buy with square footage, thick walls, and locked doors. We view solitude as a right, a sanctuary where we can be our true selves. But in the year 1290, privacy is not only a luxury you cannot afford, it is a concept that barely exists. To be alone is to be suspect. To be hidden is to be dangerous. Your life is lived entirely in the peripheral vision of others. The architecture of your home ensures this. Your hut is not a fortress. It is a basket woven of hazel or willow, plastered with mud. As the clay dries and the timbers shift with the seasons, cracks appear, tiny fissures that let in the draft and let out the secrets. If you raise your voice in anger, the family in the hut next door hears you. If you weep in the night, the widow across the lane knows your sorrow before morning. Sound travels through the wattle and daub, as if the walls were made of paper. You know the intimate rhythms of your neighbors' lives, their coughs, their arguments, the lullabies they sing to their children, and they know yours. There is a strange claustrophobic intimacy to this. You are living in a shared auditory hallucination where the boundaries between my house and your house are visual, not sonic. Inside the hut, the lack of privacy is even more acute. You share this single room with your parents, your children, perhaps an elderly aunt, and the livestock. There are no bedrooms, no hallways, no doors to slam. If you are a young couple, intimacy is a quiet, hurried act performed in the dark, muffled by the sounds of sleeping relatives and chewing cattle. Historians have long debated the psychological impact of this overcrowding. Some argue that medieval people developed a kind of mental privacy, a way of withdrawing into themselves while physically present, ignoring the bodies around them like commuters on a crowded subway. Others suggest that the very idea of the individual self was weaker then, that you thought of yourself first as a part of a family, then a village, and only lastly as a separate person. But the eyes of the village are not just curious. They are legally obligated to watch you. This is the most shocking truth of medieval poverty. You are your brother's keeper, and he is your jailer. The legal system of the countryside is built on a structure called the frank pledge, or tithing. Every man over the age of 12 is assigned to a group of 10 men, known as a tithing. These 10 men are collectively responsible for each other's behavior. If one of you commits a crime, steals a chicken, poaches a deer, or flees a debt, the other 9 are legally required to bring him to justice. If you fail to capture him, the entire group is fined. Imagine if your neighbor's parking ticket came out of your bank account. That is the pressure of the tithing. This system turns every neighbor into a policeman. You watch the man down the lane not because you are nosy, but because his mistakes will cost you your bread money. If he starts drinking too much, you intervene. If he stops going to church, you notice. If he brings home a sack of grain he couldn't possibly afford, you ask questions. It is a surveillance state built not on cameras, but on peer pressure. There is no anonymity here. In a modern city, you can be a stranger. In a medieval village, you are known from the moment of your birth until the moment the earth covers you. Your reputation is your credit score, your resume, and your background check all rolled into one. If a crime is actually committed, the community's role shifts from surveillance to active pursuit. This is the hue and cry. If you see a thief or witness a crime, you are required by law to raise the alarm, to shout, blow a horn, or bang a pot. And when that cry goes up, every able-bodied person within earshot must drop their tools and join the chase. You cannot say, "That's not my business." It is your business. If the village fails to raise the hue and cry, or fails to pursue the criminal to the parish boundary, the entire village is fined by the king's court. Imagine a world where ignoring a siren is a crime. This creates a society where indifference is illegal. You are bound to these people by a web of mutual liability that is thicker than the wool you wear. Then there is the Lord's Court, the Halimote or Manor Court, held every few weeks in the Lord's Hall or under a great tree. This is where the filthy truth becomes public record. The court rolls, the written records of these proceedings, are essentially the gossip columns of the Middle Ages. Here, villagers are fined for the pettiest of infractions, and everyone hears about it. John is fined for letting his cow wander into the Lord's meadow. Alice is fined for brewing ale that was too weak, a serious offense, as ale was a staple food. William is fined for eavesdropping, literally standing under the eaves of a neighbor's house to listen to their private conversation. The fact that eavesdropper is a legal term tells you everything you need to know about the privacy levels of the time. Sexual morality is also a matter of public finance. If a woman from a serf family gets married, her father must pay a merchant, a fine to the Lord for the loss of her labor. If she has a child out of wedlock, there is a fine called lerwite. These are not private family matters. They are transactions read out in court. Your romantic life is a line item in the Lord's ledger. The village alehouse, often just a neighbor's front room where a fresh batch is being served, is the rumor mill where these judgments are dissected. The scold, a person, usually a woman, accused of being a public nuisance through gossip or aggressive speech, might be punished with the ducking stool or a heavy iron bridle. Though historians argue this was less common in the 13th century than in later periods. Still, the fear of the rough music, a public shaming ritual where neighbors would bang pots and mock you for moral failings, keeps most people in line. Yet, there is a strange comfort in this total lack of privacy. In a world without police, insurance, or hospitals, your neighbors are your safety net. If your house catches fire, they will form the bucket brigade because the fire threatens them too. If you fall ill, they will know immediately and bring aid, however primitive. You are never invisible. You are never left to rot in an apartment for weeks without anyone noticing. You are woven into the fabric of the village so tightly that you cannot fall out. The eyes in the wall are judgmental Yes, but they are also watchful. As the night deepens, you lie on your pallet, listening to the breathing of your family. Through the wall, you hear the muffled sound of a neighbor coughing, a dry, hacking sound that has been getting worse for weeks. You make a mental note to bring them some of your dried sage in the morning. You cannot shut out the world. You cannot lock the door and pretend the village doesn't exist. The village is in the room with you. It is in your head. It is the audience to your life, and you are the audience to theirs. The concept of personal space is centuries away. You sleep shoulder to shoulder, warm against the cold. You share the bowl, the cup, the bench, the air. It is stifling, overwhelming, and occasionally maddening. But as the wind howls outside, rattling the shutters and threatening the thatch, there is a deep, primal reassurance in the presence of others. You are part of a herd, and while the herd offers no privacy, it offers the only thing that matters more to a peasant than dignity, survival. You close your eyes, knowing that if you cried out in the night, a dozen people would hear you. In the dark, terrifying silence of the medieval world, that is no small thing. The eyes of your neighbors may watch your actions, but there is a higher, heavier gaze that watches your soul, and its presence is announced not by a whisper, but by a roar of bronze. Above the thatched roofs of the village, rising like a stone finger pointing accusingly at heaven, stands the church tower. It is the only structure in your world made of stone that you are allowed to enter. While the Lord's castle is a fortress built to keep you out, the church is a fortress built to keep you in. And from this tower comes the sound that structures every minute of your life, the bell. In a world without wristwatches, clocks, or smartphone alarms, time is not a personal possession. It is a divine monopoly. The church owns time. The bell rings for matins before the sun is up, pulling the monks in the nearby priory from their beds and signaling to you that the night is ending. It rings for prime at sunrise, terce in the mid-morning, sext at noon, none in the mid-afternoon, and finally vespers and compline as the light fails. You do not know it is 3 o'clock. You know it is the hour of none, the time when the shadows lengthen and your stomach begins to ask for the evening meal. The bell is the heartbeat of the parish, a relentless metallic pulse that tells you when to wake, when to pray, when to eat, and eventually, when to die. On Sunday, the bell's command is absolute. You wash your face with a little more care, perhaps smoothing your hair with water or a bit of animal fat, and walk to the churchyard. This is the center of your social universe. The graveyard is not a somber, silent place of Victorian mourning. It is a bustling public square. Markets are held here. Agreements are struck between neighbors over the graves of their ancestors, and children play games of tag among the wooden crosses. It is a place of life as much as death. But when the bell stops tolling, you must go inside. Stepping through the heavy oak doors, you leave the familiar world of mud and timber and enter a space that feels alien and overwhelming. The air inside is cool, smelling of damp stone, beeswax candles, and the accumulated sweat of the congregation. There are no pews. You do not sit comfortably with a hymn book. You stand. The entire village stands, packed together on the rush-strewn floor. Men on one side, women on the other. A segregation that mirrors the order of the universe. The walls are not bare stone. They are plastered and painted with vivid, terrifying murals. This is the Bible of the poor. You cannot read a single word of scripture. Literacy is a dangerous magic reserved for the clergy. But you can read the walls. Dominating the chancel arch, right above where the priest stands, is the Doom painting. It is a graphic, technicolor depiction of the Last Judgment. On one side, the saved are naked and smiling, being led into a golden city. On the other side, demons with pitchforks and gaping mouths are shoving the damned into the fiery maw of hell. You see people being boiled in cauldrons, flayed alive, and eaten by serpents. It is the medieval equivalent of a horror movie projected in 4K resolution onto the wall you have to look at every single week. It is designed to scare you, and it works. You stare at the demons and wonder if the one with the goat head looks a bit like the miller who cheated you last week. The service itself is a mystery. The priest stands at the far end, often with his back to you, mumbling in Latin, a language you do not speak. Ocest corpus meum, he whispers, this is my body. To your ears, it sounds like a spell. In fact, historians argue that this very phrase, mumbled by uneducated priests, might be the origin of the magician's hocus pocus. You are not there to understand the theology. You are there to witness the miracle. When the priest raises the host, the communion bread, a small bell rings, and you might catch a glimpse of the white wafer. This moment, the elevation, is the climax of your week. It is the closest you will ever get to magic. You believe with a deep, superstitious dread that seeing the host can protect you from sudden death or blindness for the rest of the day. But the church is not just a spiritual provider. It is the largest, most demanding landlord you will ever know. The priest needs to eat, the bishop needs his wine, and the pope in distant Rome needs his gold. This is where the tithe comes in. The word means tenth, and it is not a suggestion. You must give 10% of everything you produce to the church, not 10% of your profit, but 10% of your gross yield. If you grow 10 sheaves of wheat, the church takes 1. If your goat has 10 kids, the church takes 1. If you have 10 chickens, the church takes the best one. This transaction happens at the tithe barn, a massive storage building often larger than the church itself. You walk there with your cart, watching the priest or his clerk count your harvest. It is a moment of intense, quiet tension. You have worked the soil until your hands bled. You have prayed for rain. You have fought off the crows. And now you must hand over a significant portion of your survival to a man who, in some villages, might be little more than a glorified bureaucrat with a tonsure. There is a filthy truth here. The church is often wealthy while you are starving. You see the priest's belly, perhaps a bit rounder than yours, and you feel a spark of resentment that you quickly extinguish with a prayer, for fear that God is listening to your thoughts. Yet, despite the taxes and the terror of the doom painting, the church offers the only safety net you have. It is the sole provider of charity. If the harvest fails completely and you are starving, the monastery might distribute alms, scraps of food, or old clothes. It is the hospital where the sick are tended by nuns who know the secrets of herbs. It is the calendar that gives you rest. The church provides the holy days, holidays, the only sanctioned time off from work. You look forward to Christmas, Easter, Whitsun, and Michaelmas, not just for the spiritual salvation, but because they are the only days you are allowed to stop. The feast days are explosions of color and food in a drab life. times when the church ale is brewed and the village gets collectively joyously drunk in the name of a saint. Historians still argue about the depth of medieval piety. Was the average peasant truly a devout Christian, deeply moved by the passion of Christ? Or were they merely following the rules to avoid social shunning and the fires of hell, while secretly holding onto older pagan superstitions? The truth is likely a muddy mixture of both. You cross yourself when you pass a roadside shrine, but you also leave a bowl of milk out for the house spirits, just in case. You pray to Saint Christopher for safe travel, but you also wear a charm made of a wolf's tooth to ward off fever. Your faith is practical. You use whatever tools, holy water or hawthorn branches, that might help you survive the night. The service ends. The priest dismisses you. You step back out into the light, blinking. The stone fortress of the church has done its job. It has reset your internal clock, reminded you of your smallness, and taken its cut of your labor. You are poorer in grain, but richer in grace, or so you are told. The bell rings again, signaling the end of the Mass. The sound rolls over the graveyard, over the thatched roofs, and out across the fields where the plough waits for you tomorrow. It is a sound of immense, crushing authority. You button your rough tunic against the wind and head home. The Sunday best clothes will be folded away, the work clothes will be brought out, and the cycle will begin again. The church tower watches you go, a stone sentinel that never sleeps, ensuring that even in the privacy of your own soul, you are never truly free from the hierarchy that rules the world. When the bell from the church tower fades into the damp evening air, another sound often takes its place in the quiet of the village. The sound of a cough, a groan, or the sharp cry of pain. In a world where antibiotics are centuries away, and a simple scratch can turn into a lethal infection, sickness is not merely an inconvenience. It is a terrifying intruder that sits by your hearth, uninvited and often permanent. You do not call in sick to work. You work until you drop, and when you drop, you enter a realm of medicine that is equal parts wisdom, desperation, and magic. There is no white-walled hospital for you, no sterile smell of antiseptic. Your sickbed is the same straw pallet you sleep on every night, and your doctor is likely your grandmother, a neighbor, or the village wise woman whose knowledge is a patchwork of oral tradition and trial and error. To understand medieval medicine, you must forget everything you know about viruses and bacteria. In your world, the body is a sack of fluids, a microcosm of the elements. You are governed by the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health is not the absence of germs. It is the balance of these fluids. If you have a fever, you have too much blood, hot and moist. If you have a cold, you have too much phlegm, cold and moist. The cure, therefore, is to drain the excess or counteract it with opposites. This is why, if you are flushed with fever, the village healer might suggest bloodletting. For a wealthy merchant, this would be done with a fine lancet by a barber surgeon. For you, it might be done with a sharpened reed, a knife, or more commonly, leeches. You might walk to the local pond, roll up your breeches, and wade in, letting the black, writhing worms attach themselves to your legs. It is free, it is accessible, and in a twisted way, it makes sense to you. You are releasing the bad blood to let the sickness out. Most of your medical care, however, comes from the garden. The medieval peasant is a master botanist out of necessity. You know that willow bark, when chewed, eases the throbbing of a headache, a truth that modern science confirms, as it contains salicin, the ancestor of aspirin. You know that a poultice of bread and milk can draw the infection out of a boil. You know that sage is good for the memory and the throat, and that betony is a cure-all that protects against nightmares and goblins. Your medicine cabinet is the hedgerow, but the line between medicine and magic is non-existent. When you gather herbs, you might recite a charm or a prayer to activate their power. You might pick them only by moonlight or when the dew is fresh. Is it the plant that heals or the prayer? You do not separate the two. They are two halves of the same cure. There are remedies, however, that would make a modern stomach turn. Urine is a universal cleaner and diagnostic tool. A piss prophet or healer might look at the color, smell, and even taste of your urine to determine what ails you. If you have an earache, the prescription might be the fat of a roasted eel dropped into the ear canal. If you have a deep cut, you might pack it with cobwebs to stop the bleeding, which, surprisingly, often works due to the coagulating properties of the silk. For a burn, you might apply a salve made of goose grease and boar dung. These filthy cures are born of a worldview where everything in nature has a purpose and a potency. Nothing is wasted, not even waste itself. The greatest terror, however, is the toothache. In a world without drills or Novocaine, a rotten tooth is a sentence of torture. You believe, as many do, that the pain is caused by a toothworm, a tiny demon wriggling inside the bone. To drive it out, you might inhale the smoke of burning henbane seeds, which are mildly hallucinogenic and might make the worm or the nerve pass out. If that fails, there is only the blacksmith or the barber with his pliers. The extraction is brutal, swift, and performed without anesthesia, save perhaps for a stiff drink of ale. The hole is then cauterized with a hot iron to stop the bleeding and kill the rot. It is a moment of blinding agony that leaves you trembling, but it is better than the slow, throbbing death of an abscess that could poison your blood. Historians and archaeologists constantly debate the effectiveness of this kitchen physic. Skeptics point to the high mortality rates and the bizarre, superstitious cures, like wearing a dried toad in a bag around your neck to stop a nosebleed, as proof of ignorance. But newer research, particularly in the field of ethnobotany, suggests that many medieval remedies were surprisingly potent. The onion and garlic salve used for eye infections, for example, has been found in modern lab tests to kill antibiotic-resistant bacteria like MRSA. The filthy peasants, it seems, were brewing superdrugs in their cauldrons without understanding the chemistry, guided only by the brutal Darwinian process of remembering what worked and forgetting what killed you. There is a gendered aspect to this care that cannot be ignored. The formal medical profession, the university-trained physicians who read Galen and Hippocrates in Latin, is almost exclusively male and entirely out of your price range. They charge a gold coin just to look at your urine. Your survival depends on women. It is the mother, the wife, the alewife, with a side hustle in herbs, who tends the sick. These women are the unacknowledged doctors of the Middle Ages. They are the ones who know how to mix a posset of hot milk and ale for a cold, how to set a broken bone with splints of wood, and how to deliver a baby when the hips are narrow and the night is long. Yet, their knowledge is always on the edge of suspicion. If a cure works too well, or if a patient dies unexpectedly, the whisper of witchcraft can start. It is a dangerous line to walk, healing the body while risking the soul. Pain is also interpreted differently. It is not just a biological signal. It is a spiritual message. Suffering is seen as a way to purge sin, a test from God to purify the soul. This does not mean you enjoy it, but it gives the pain meaning. When you lie on your pallet, shivering with the ague, malaria was common in the marshy parts of Europe. You pray. You bargain with saints. You promise to go on a pilgrimage to the nearest shrine if you survive. The church offers spiritual medicine, confession, prayer, holy water, that is seen as just as essential as the herbal tea. You treat the sin and the sickness together. The smell of the sick room is heavy, sweat, sickness, smoke, and the sharp scent of burning herbs like rosemary or juniper used to fumigate the air and drive away the miasma. You lie there, watching the firelight dance on the soot-stained thatch, feeling the fragility of your own existence. There is no guarantee of recovery. A simple flu can become pneumonia. A cut can become gangrene. Death is not a distant stranger. He is a neighbor who leans over the fence. You have seen him take the strong and the weak alike. This proximity to death gives the medieval peasant a certain fatalism, a dark humor that shrugs at tragedy because it is so common. He's gone to feed the worms, you might say, not with cruelty, but with an acceptance of the cycle. Yet you fight. You drink the bitter, muddy decoction of herbs. You let the leech suck. You endure the sweat lodge. And often, you survive. The human body is resilient, even when fueled by bread and beer. The fever breaks. The swelling goes down. You wake up one morning, weak as a kitten, but hungry. The world looks sharper, brighter. You have cheated the grave for another season. You stand up, your legs shaking, and walk to the door. The air smells of rain and earth, not sickness. You are alive. But as you look around the hut, your eyes land on the smaller bundles sleeping near the fire, the children. You survived, but will they? The fur grips you again, colder than the fever. In this world, the smallest lives are the heaviest burdens, and their survival is the true miracle of the age. The firelight that danced on your own recovery now settles on the smallest forms in the room, the sleeping children who are tucked into the warmest corner of the hut, perhaps even nestled against the flank of the cow for extra heat. In the medieval world, childhood is not a protected kingdom of innocence and safety. It is a siege. To be a child is to exist in a state of extreme vulnerability, a little shadow that might flicker out with the slightest draft. The statistics are the grim arithmetic of poverty. Historians estimate that perhaps 30 to 50% of all children born in this era will not live to see their 10th birthday. Every family knows this math. It is written in the small unmarked graves in the churchyard and in the empty spaces at the dinner table. But this high mortality rate has birthed one of the most persistent and unfair myths about the Middle Ages. The idea that parents, expecting their children to die, did not love them. This is the indifference thesis, once popular among historians like Philippe Ariès, who argued that medieval people treated children like replaceable livestock, refusing to attach themselves emotionally until the child proved it could survive. You look at the sleeping face of your youngest, flushed with the heat of the room, and you know this is a lie. The filthy truth is not that you love them less, but that you have to love them more bravely. The grief of a medieval parent is not muted by frequency. It is a screaming, tearing wound that appears in court records, in poems, and in the desperate prayers scratched into shrine walls. When a child dies, the village mourns. You do not detach. You cherish them with a fierce, terrified intensity, because you know exactly how fragile they are. The journey begins with swaddling. If you have an infant, they are not kicking freely in a crib. They are wrapped tight in long strips of linen, bound like a tiny mummy, until they cannot move their limbs. This is done for two reasons, one practical, one medical. Practically, a swaddled baby stays where you put it, in a house with an open fire, free-roaming pigs, and sharp tools. An immobile baby is a safe baby. Medically, you believe that babies are soft and malleable, like warm wax. If you do not bind their limbs straight, they might grow up crooked or lame. So you wrap them, creating a stiff little package that can be hung from a peg on the wall or strapped to your back while you work. It looks cruel to modern eyes, but to you, it is an act of supreme care. You are sculpting their future strength. As they grow and escape the swaddling bands, the dangers multiply. The medieval home is a death trap for a toddler. The coroner's rolls, records of accidental deaths investigated by the Crown, are heartbreaking catalogues of curiosity gone wrong. They tell of children falling into the open hearth while trying to reach a pot, of drowning in the village well, of being kicked by a horse, or of pulling a cauldron of boiling water down upon themselves. There are no baby gates, no safety latches, no child-proofing. You watch them with the vigilance of a hawk, but you are also exhausted, working, and distracted. A moment of silence in a medieval hut is usually a sign of impending disaster. Yet, amidst the danger, there is play. The concept that medieval children were just miniature adults who never played is another myth. Archaeology proves otherwise. We find their toys in the mud, distinct, purposeful objects made for joy, a knight carved from a stick, a doll made of rags with a painted face, a ball of stitched leather filled with moss, or knuckle bones, sheep ankles used like dice. They play tag, they wrestle, they make mud pies, which, given the floor, is just pies. They imitate you. You see your son pushing a deer antler across the dirt, pretending it is a plow. You see your daughter scolding a chicken, pretending to be the bailiff. Imagination is the one luxury that poverty cannot tax. It is free and it is vivid. But the golden hour of play is short. By the age of 5 or 7, the age the church calls the age of reason, the transition to work begins. There is no kindergarten. There is only the economy of the family. A 6-year-old cannot pull a plow, but they can do 1,000 other things. They can be a goose girl or a shepherd boy, sitting in a field for hours, alone, watching the flock. It is a lonely, frightening job for a child, scanning the woods for wolves or thieves, armed only with a stick and a voice. They can be scarecrows, tasked with running through the planted fields, shouting and throwing stones to keep the crows from eating the seeds. If they fall asleep and the birds descend, they will be beaten, not out of cruelty, but because the loss of that grain means the family does not eat. This early labor is not seen as exploitation. It is seen as education. You are teaching them how to survive. If a girl does not learn to spin wool by age 8, she will have no value in the marriage market and no way to clothe herself. If a boy cannot handle an ox goad, he is useless to the village. You are apprenticing them to the hard reality of their station. They are small cogs in the machine, Yes, but they are essential cogs. Their contribution, the berries they pick, the water they fetch, the firewood they gather, is the margin between comfort and catastrophe. Food is a constant battle for the young. A weaning child is at the highest risk. When the mother's milk stops, often late, as breastfeeding suppresses fertility and saves money, the substitute is pap. This is a mixture of bread soaked in water, milk, or broth. It is soft, but it is often nutritionally poor and worse, served in vessels that are hard to clean. Bacterial infections from contaminated pap kill thousands. You do not know about bacteria, but you know that the summer sickness takes the little ones when the heat spoils the milk. You fight it with prayers and careful boiling, but sometimes the cradle still falls silent. The sleeping arrangements reveal the deepest anxiety. The church constantly warns against overlaying, accidentally rolling over and smothering an infant in the shared bed. It is a frequent tragedy in a world where everyone sleeps in one pile for warmth. Priests thunder from the pulpit that infants should sleep in a separate cradle. But can you afford a cradle? Can you keep the baby warm enough alone? Often, the answer is no. So you take the risk. You curl your body around the child, a human shield against the cold, sleeping lightly, waking at every shift of their weight. The bed is a place of comfort, but also of low-level, constant vigilance. Education, in the formal sense, is a dream for other people. There are no schools for your children unless a local priest takes pity on a bright boy and teaches him the alphabet. But for the vast majority, literacy is a locked door. Their school is the field, the forest, and the fireside. They learn the names of the birds, the signs of the weather, the stories of the saints, and the unwritten laws of the village. They learn to endure. They learn that crying does not bring food, that pain is temporary, and that family is the only fortress that matters. This peasant education is rigorous and unforgiving. A child who does not learn the difference between a poisonous mushroom and an edible one does not get a failing grade. They get a funeral. As the children grow, they become youths, a distinct stage of life recognized by medieval society. They are rowdy, rebellious, and prone to trouble. Some things never change. The boys might form gangs, playing violent versions of football where broken legs are common and the ball is an inflated pig's bladder. The girls begin to navigate the complex social web of the village, learning who to trust and who to avoid. They are teenagers without the word teenager, caught between the playfulness of childhood and the crushing responsibility of adulthood. You watch them with a mixture of pride and fear, knowing that soon they will be the ones pulling the plow, and you will be the elder sitting by the fire if you survive that long. In the dim light, you see one of the children stir. A small hand reaches out, grasping at the air, dreaming of catching a butterfly, or perhaps warding off a goblin. You reach out and gently tuck the rough wool blanket back over the small shoulder. The filthy truth is that these children are covered in dirt, lice, and sores. They have no shoes. Their noses are running. They are hungry. But they are also the most precious things in the universe. They are the defiance of death. Every breath they take is a victory against the odds. You, the medieval parent, are not indifferent. You are a warrior guarding a flickering candle in a hurricane. You stroke the matted hair of your daughter, murmuring a soft nonsense sound to soothe her back to sleep. The wind outside is picking up, howling around the corners of the hut, bringing with it the scent of snow. The season is turning, the harvest is in, the work is slowing, and the great white silence is coming to test you all. The wind outside changes its voice. It no longer whistles through the eaves with the playful, gusty temper of autumn. Now it screams. A deep, hollow moaning sound rises from the north, carrying with it a silence that is heavy and absolute. You wake one morning to find that the familiar grey light of the dawn has been replaced by a strange, luminous brilliance seeping through the cracks in the shutters. You unbar the door, pushing against a new weight, and as it swings open, the world you knew has vanished. The mud, the brown fields, the midden heap, all of it has been erased, buried under a foot of pristine, blinding white snow. Winter has closed its fist around the village. For the medieval peasant, this is not a season of festive ski trips or cozy hot chocolate. It is a siege. The great sleep has begun, a time when the rhythm of life slows to a near halt, and the hut becomes a capsule of survival floating in a frozen ocean. You step back inside and seal the door. This timber frame, this wattle and daub, is now the only thing separating you from a temperature that can kill a man in hours. The cold is a physical presence in the room. It seeks out every draught, every gap in the thatch, every thin patch in your tunic. You layer on everything you own. You wear your hood indoors. You wrap your feet in rags and straw inside your boots. But the most important source of heat is not the fire. Wood is precious, and chopping it in deep snow is exhausting. It is the living engine at the end of the room. The ox, the cow, and the few sheep you have brought indoors are now your radiators. You move the family pallet closer to them. You can smell their wet wool, their manure, their warm, grassy breath. It is a pungent, heavy atmosphere, but it is warm. The difference between freezing and surviving is often the body heat of a ruminant. The work of the fields has stopped. The earth is locked hard as iron, the plough useless until the thaw. This brings a strange, terrifying kind of leisure. For 9 months of the year, you are a slave to the soil, working until your muscles fail. Now, you are a prisoner of the house. Historians have long debated the nature of this winter downtime. Was it a golden age of rest, a peasant's holiday, or was it a period of crushing boredom and anxiety? The truth lies in the larder. You are now eating time. Every day you sit by the fire is a day you are consuming resources that cannot be replaced until late spring. You look at the sacks of grain, the barrels of salted meat, the strings of dried onions hanging from the rafters. They are a ticking clock. If the winter is long, if the snow holds until April, the food will run out. The wolf month, the Anglo-Saxon name for January, Wolf Moneth, is not just poetic. It is literal. The wolves, starving in the forest, get bolder, coming closer to the village, their howls mixing with the wind. You count the onions. You measure the flour with a trembling hand. Diet changes drastically. There is no fresh pottage now. You are eating preservation. The meat, if you have any, is so heavily salted that it must be soaked for hours before it is edible. It is hard, grey, and tastes of brine. You eat peas pudding, dried peas boiled into a thick, mortar-like paste that sits heavy in the stomach. You eat stockfish, cod dried until it is as hard as wood, which must be beaten with a hammer before cooking. Your vitamin intake plummets. Scurvy, with its bleeding gums and lethargy, is a winter guest. You feel the lack of the sun in your bones, a deep ache that no fire can truly touch. Darkness becomes your primary environment. Candles made of beeswax are for the church and the Lord. You cannot afford to burn your wages. You use rushlights, reeds dipped in animal fat, which burn with a smoky, sputtering flame that gives off barely enough light to see your hands. But mostly, you live in the dark. This changes your relationship with sleep. Without artificial light to extend the day, you sleep for 12, sometimes 14 hours. But it is not a solid block. You experience biphasic sleep. You go to bed at sunset, sleep for 4 hours, and then wake up in the dead of night. This is the watch. For an hour or two, the whole family is awake in the dark. You might pray, you might tend the fire, you might tell stories. Then, you go back to sleep for a second sleep, until dawn. This midnight hour is a magical, liminal time, a secret pocket of existence where the world is quiet and the mind is free. Boredom is the other enemy. To keep from going mad in the small, smoky room, you turn to the only entertainment you have, the voice. This is the season of storytelling. The elders, who are too stiff to work the winter fields, even if they could, become the most valuable people in the room. They hold the library of the village in their heads. They tell of Beowulf and monsters, of Robin Hood, the outlaw who fights the sheriff, of saints who tame dragons, and of the local ghosts who haunt the mill. These are not just stories. They are moral instruction, history lessons, and warnings. You learn that greed is punished, that the woods are dangerous, and that even the smallest person can trick a giant. The children listen, wide-eyed in the firelight, the shadows on the wall acting out the drama. This is your Netflix, your novel, your news. The spoken word is the thread that holds the community together through the long, white silence. Hygiene takes a serious hit in winter. If bathing was difficult in summer, it is impossible now. You do not take off your clothes. You add layers. The lice thrive in the warmth of the wool and the proximity of bodies. You itch constantly. The smoke from the fire, unable to escape through the snow-covered roof vent, builds up inside, creating a smoke layer that hovers at shoulder height. You learn to walk stooped, to keep your head in the clearer air near the floor. Your eyes are perpetually red and stinging. Your lungs are coated in soot. You are curing yourself like a ham in a smokehouse. There are chores, of course. You mend tools. You whittle spoons. You weave baskets. The women spin wool endlessly. The whir, whir, whir of the spindle becoming the soundtrack of the winter. But the pace is slow. The calories must be conserved. You move with a deliberate lethargy. The great sleep is not just physical. It is a mental hibernation. You conserve your thoughts, your worries, your energy. You enter a state of endurance, waiting for the signal, the drip of melting ice, the first green shoot that says life has returned. But the winter also brings the community closer in a desperate, huddled way. If a neighbor runs out of wood, you share. If a family's roof collapses under the snow, you dig them out. The village becomes a single organism fighting the cold. You celebrate the winter festivals, Yuletide, the Feast of Fools, with a frantic, almost manic energy. You drink the last of the autumn ale. You feast on the last of the fresh meat before Lent. You dance in the barn until you are sweating, defying the frost with body heat and noise. These explosions of joy are necessary. They break the monotony of the grey days and remind you that you are still alive, still human, still capable of laughter in the face of the freeze. The filthy truth of winter is that it is a time of suspension. You are suspended between life and death, between the harvest and the hunger. You look at your hands, cracked and bleeding from the cold, the dirt ingrained so deep it seems to be part of the skin. You look at the frost-fern patterns on the inside of the door. You are trapped. But in this trap, there is a strange, quiet safety. The bailiff will not come today. The tax collector is snowed in. The wars of kings are paused by the mud and ice. For a few months, the world is small, cold, and entirely yours. You wrap the blanket tighter, pull the children close, and listen to the wind howling its frustration at being unable to reach you. You are the master of the hut, the king of the embers, waiting for the sun to remember your name. The thaw comes not with a gentle warmth, but with a chaotic, slurping sound as the world turns from white to brown. The ice that locked the village in silence melts into a sea of mud, and the roads, if you can call them that, reappear. For the modern mind, a road is a promise of freedom, a line on a map that leads to adventure. But for you, the medieval peasant, the road is a source of profound anxiety. It is the road to nowhere, or worse, the road to ruin. Stepping beyond the boundary markers of your parish is not a vacation. It is an act of exposure that strips away your identity and your safety. You are defined by your village. You are John of the Green or Alice the Weaver's daughter. Outside the sound of your church bell, you are nobody. You're a stranger, a word that, in the medieval vocabulary, is synonymous with suspect. To travel is to become a ghost in a land of living, hostile eyes. The physical reality of the road is the first deterrent. There are no paved highways here, save for the crumbling, overgrown skeletons of Roman roads that cut straight lines through the landscape, haunted by the memory of legions. Your road is a dirt track, churned into a quagmire by carts and hooves. In the spring thaw, it can swallow a man to his knees. You do not travel for pleasure. You travel because you must, to take grain to a distant market, to visit a dying relative, or, in the most desperate cases, to flee. But leaving is not a simple matter of walking away. If you are a serf, you are glebi ad scripti, bound to the soil. Your body belongs to the land, and the land belongs to the Lord. To leave without permission is to steal yourself. You must pay a fine, the chevaj or head money, just for the privilege of living outside the manor for a year. If you flee without paying, you are a fugitive. The Lord can send men to drag you back, branding you on the forehead with a hot iron to mark you as a runaway. If you do step onto the road, you enter the domain of the forest. This is not the recreational hiking trail of the 21st century. This is the wild, a legal and physical wilderness that terrifies the imagination. The forest is dark, dense, and dangerous. It is the home of wolves, real wolves that hunt in packs during the winter and snatch livestock in the spring. But the greater predator is man. The woods are the realm of the outlaw. These are not the merry men of Hollywood legend, robbing the rich to feed the poor. They are desperate, violent men who have been cast out of society. In the eyes of the law, an outlaw is a caput lupinum, a wolf's head. This means they are no longer considered human. They have no legal rights. Anyone can kill them on sight without penalty, just as you would kill a wolf. Their heads can be brought to the sheriff for a reward. This legal brutality creates a landscape of fear. Every shadow in the tree line could be a bandit waiting to slit your throat for your shoes. You walk with your head down, clutching your staff. You have no weapon, Swords are for knights, and carrying one would get you arrested. Your only defense is your poverty. Cantabit vacuus coram latrone viator, the old proverb says. The empty traveler sings in the presence of the robber. You hope that your rags are enough to prove you are not worth killing. But violence is not the only threat. The forest itself is a legal minefield. It belongs to the king. The forest law is a separate, draconian legal system designed to protect the vert and venison, the green vegetation, and the deer. If you are caught killing a deer, you could be blinded or castrated. If you are caught cutting down a tree for firewood, you are fined. The king's foresters patrol these woods, corrupt officials who often extort bribes from travelers. The trees are not nature, they are property, and you are trespassing. Nightfall on the road is a moment of pure, primal terror. There are no streetlights. The darkness is absolute. You cannot see the path. You cannot see the ditch. You certainly cannot see the person standing 10 feet away. Travelers band together, huddling in groups for safety, sleeping in the hedgerows or, if lucky, in a barn. Inns exist, but they are expensive and often hubs of disease and prostitution. You sleep with one eye open, your coin pouch, if you have one, tied to your skin. The silence of the countryside is broken by the screech of owls and the rustle of unseen things. Superstition fills the void. You fear the will-o'-the-wisp, the ghostly lights that lead travelers into bogs to drown. You fear the black dog, a demon that haunts crossroads. The medieval map is not just geography. It is a theology of monsters. There is one exception to this fear, one passport that opens doors, the pilgrimage. If you sew a badge onto your hat, a scallop shell for St. James, a vernicle for Rome, or a simple pewter ampulla from a local shrine, you become a holy traveler. The church protects you. Villagers who would otherwise set the dogs on you might offer you a bowl of pottage or a bed in the straw. Pilgrimage is the medieval vacation, the gap year, and the retirement plan all rolled into one. It is the only socially acceptable reason to wander. You see pilgrims on the road, walking with a strange, purposeful joy, singing hymns to keep the rhythm. They are heading to Canterbury, to Walsingham, or to a holy well to cure a blindness or a barren womb. For a moment, on the road with them, you feel a sense of camaraderie, a fleeting membership in a community that transcends the village. But for the fugitive, the road leads to a different kind of sanctuary. If you are running from the law, you run to the church. If you can grasp the sanctuary ring, the heavy iron knocker on the church door, you are safe. The law cannot touch you on holy ground. You can stay there for 40 days, fed by the parish. After that, you must abjure the realm. You must confess your crime, dress in a white tunic, carry a wooden cross, and walk barefoot to the nearest port to leave England forever. It is a grim procession, a public shaming that ends in exile. You watch a sanctuary seeker stumbling down the road, staring at their bloody feet, and you realize that freedom is a heavy, terrible burden. The horizon is the limit of your world. You know the names of the villages within a 10-mile radius. Beyond that is the Shire. Beyond that is France or Jerusalem, places that feel as distant as the moon. Historians debate how much peasants actually knew of the wider world. Some argue they were surprisingly well informed by traveling merchants and friars. Others say their mental map was incredibly small. But for you, the filthy truth is that distance is measured in shoe leather and hunger. every mile you walk is a mile you have to walk back. The road is exhausting. It wears you down. It is a reminder of your own smallness in a vast, indifferent kingdom. As you crest a hill and see the smoke of a strange village in the valley below, you feel a tightening in your chest. You are an outsider here. The people in that village will look at your clothes, listen to your accent, and know you do not belong. They will watch you. The innkeeper will overcharge you. The dogs will bark at you. You are experiencing the deep tribal suspicion that governs medieval life. You are not a citizen of a nation, you are a member of a parish. Leaving it is a trauma. You realize that the freedom of the road is a myth. The road is just a long, muddy corridor between two cages. Eventually, the pull of home becomes a physical ache. You turn back. The return journey is faster, driven by the desire for the known. When you finally see the familiar shape of your own church tower, the smoke rising from your own roof, the midden heap that smells of your own life, you feel a wave of relief that brings tears to your eyes. You step back into the mud of your village, back into the surveillance of your neighbors, back into the crushing, comforting embrace of your poverty. You have seen the world, and it was cold, hard, and hungry. You hang your staff by the door. You scrape the road mud from your boots. You sit by the fire. And as the heat seeps into your tired legs, you vow never to leave again. The world out there is for knights and merchants. For you, the filthy truth is that the only place you matter is the place where you were born. The road to nowhere has led you back to the only somewhere you have. The road has led you back to the only sanctuary you know, the hearth. As you sit there, the mud drying on your boots and the smoke stinging your eyes, you might be tempted to see this life solely as a tragedy. It is easy for the modern mind to look back at the Middle Ages and see only the filth, the disease, the oppression, and the fear. We imagine a grey, joyless existence where people trudge through the muck, heads down, waiting to die. But if that were the whole truth, the human race would have given up long ago. The final and perhaps most important, filthy truth is that amidst the squalor and the struggle, there were sparks of intense, defiant, and raucous joy. The medieval poor did not just survive, they lived, and they did so with a vibrancy that would shock a modern observer. The center of this resilience is the alehouse. It is not a building, but a temporary event. When a neighbor brews a fresh batch of ale, she sticks a bush, a bundle of evergreen branches, on a pole outside her door. This is the signal. You and your neighbors gather in her main room, squeezing onto benches, bringing your own wooden mugs. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, wood smoke, and the sweet, yeasty scent of fermenting grain. You drink the small beer, which is weak, but you drink it in such quantities that the buzz is inevitable. Here, the strict hierarchy of the outside world dissolves. The bailiff is mocked, the priest is mimicked, the Lord is the butt of 1,000 jokes. Humor is your weapon. It is earthy, bawdy, and often cruel, but it is free. You laugh at the absurdity of your own suffering. You tell stories of the land of cocaine, a mythical paradise where roasted pigs run around with knives in their backs begging to be eaten, and where work is forbidden. It is a fantasy of gluttony and rest, a collective dream that makes the hunger of tomorrow bearable. Music is the heartbeat of this joy. You do not need an orchestra. You need a pipe, a tabor, a small drum, or a fiddle. The moment the music starts, the exhaustion of the fields is forgotten. You dance. This is not the polite, measured waltzing of the nobility. This is the carol, a circle dance where everyone holds hands and moves in a ring, singing the chorus together. It is energetic, stamping, sweating, and communal. You spin until you are dizzy, the room blurring into a swirl of firelight and faces. The floor shakes, the dust rises. For a few hours, you are not a serf bound to the soil. You are a body in motion, alive and electric. Historians debate the nature of this merry England. Was it truly a time of communal bliss, or is this a nostalgic invention? The court records suggest the former. They are full of fines for rough music, dancing in churchyards, and playing games during divine service. The authorities tried to suppress it, but the joy of the poor was a weed that could not be killed. Then there are the festivals. The church gives you the calendar, and you fill it with chaos. On May Day, the village explodes into green. You go a-maying into the woods before dawn, gathering branches and flowers to decorate the houses. You set up a maypole, a tall phallic symbol that the church hates but tolerates. And you dance around it, weaving ribbons in a complex, colorful braid. It is a celebration of fertility, of life returning to the dead earth. Young men and women disappear into the woods together, returning with green gowns, grass stains on their dresses that tell a story of courtship and freedom. This brings us to love. The filthy truth is that the poor were often freer in love than the rich. A noblewoman was a political pawn, married off at 12 to secure a treaty or a dowry. You, the peasant, have nothing to trade but your labor. While you still need your parents' permission and the Lord's approval, you generally marry within your class, often to someone you actually know and like. Courtship is simple. A shared walk, a carved wooden spoon given as a gift, a ribbon bought at a fair. The marriage ceremony itself might be as simple as hand fasting, joining hands in front of witnesses and declaring your intent. "I take thee, John," is enough. There is no white dress, no ring of gold. There is a ring of rush or straw, woven quickly and slipped onto a finger. It is fragile, like your life, but it binds you together against the dark. Sex is not the taboo subject that Victorian historians later painted it to be. The medieval peasant is practical about biology. You live with animals. You see birth and copulation every day. The language of the village is frank. You know that passion is a part of life, a comfort in the cold. The church tries to regulate it, preaching that sex is only for procreation and forbidden on feast days, fast days, and during menstruation, which technically rules out about 40% of the year. But in the privacy of the hut, under the sheepskin, the church's rules are often whispered away. You find warmth where you can. There is also the joy of the church ale. This is a fundraising event where the church wardens brew in massive amounts of ale and sell it to the parish. It is a holy bake sale, but with beer. The entire village turns out. There are plays, mystery plays, performed on wagons or in the churchyard. You watch your neighbors dressed up as Noah, or the devil, or Herod. The acting is terrible. The costumes are made of painted sacks. But the laughter is genuine. You see the blacksmith playing God, standing on a barrel, and for a moment, the divine feels accessible, human, and local. These plays are often hilarious, filled with slapstick comedy, where devils run into the crowd and beat people with inflated bladders. It is a release valve for a society under immense pressure. But the deepest joy comes from the simple, quiet solidarity of survival. When a child is born, the women of the village gather for the lying in. They bring the caudle, a warm spiced drink of ale or wine thickened with eggs and bread. They sit with the new mother, gossiping, comforting, and welcoming the new life. When a harvest is brought in, the harvest home supper is held, often provided by the Lord. For one night, the class barriers lower slightly. You eat fresh meat, you drink strong ale, and you toast the last sheaf of corn, the neck, which is treated like a captured spirit of the grain. You look around the table at the faces of your neighbors, weather-beaten, scarred, missing teeth, dirty, and you feel a profound tribal connection. You are the survivors. You are the ones who made it through the winter. This resilience is not just biological, it is philosophical. You possess a fatalism that is not despair, but a kind of armor. You know that life is hard. You know that death is close. But this knowledge makes the sweet moments sweeter. A single ripe apple, a warm fire on a wet night, a joke told by a friend. These things are savored with an intensity that the modern world, in its abundance, has lost. You do not take comfort for granted. You grab it with both hands. As the fire in your hut dies down to its last embers, you look at your hands. They are rough, calloused, and ingrained with the soil of the parish. They are the hands of a maker. You have made a life out of nothing but mud, wood, and will. You have fed your children. You have paid your tithe. You have obeyed the bell. You are tired, yes. Your back aches with a dull, permanent throb. But you are not broken. The filth of the medieval world is on you, but it has not consumed you. You listen to the breathing of the house one last time. The ox, the children, the spouse. It is a symphony of life in the dark. You are part of a long, unbroken chain of humanity that stretches back into the shadows of history. You are the ancestor of the future. Your struggle, your filthy existence, is the foundation upon which the modern world will eventually be built. But you do not know that. You only know that the fire is warm, the door is barred, and for tonight, you are safe. The Middle Ages were a time of darkness, yes, but it was a darkness filled with stars. The filthy truth is that even in the mud, the human spirit shines with a stubborn, terrifying, and beautiful light. You close your eyes, letting the smoke and the smell of the earth fill your senses one last time. You drift away from the year 1290, leaving the hut, the village, and the fields behind, floating back up through the centuries, carrying with you the knowledge that while they were poor in silver, they were rich in the only currency that truly survives, the will to keep going. The fire in the center of the room has finally burned down to a soft, glowing bed of red coals. The shadows have stopped their dancing and settled into the corners of the room, heavy and still. The sounds of the village, the barking dog, the distant bell, the creaking of the mill wheel, have all faded into the deep velvet silence of history. The smoke clears from your lungs, replaced by the cool, clean air of your own time. You are safe. You are warm. The mud and the cold are just stories now, drifting away like mist over the morning fields. Let your breathing slow down, matching the quiet rhythm of the sleeping world around you. The struggle is over. The harvest is done. There is nothing left to do but rest. You have walked through the past and returned. Sink into the comfort of your own bed, feeling the softness beneath you. Let the centuries close over you like a warm blanket. Sweet dreams.